In an unprecedented and unexplained move, Prosecutor Andres Fernandez Vera has charged me with 100 criminal counts of animal abuse and neglect, including 57 felony charges. I do not abuse or neglect animals, and in fact, I operate a nonprofit animal rescue that is registered with both the Puerto Rican government, and it is a 501c3 nonprofit registered with the IRS. We have a board of directors, we have thousands of supporters, we have dozens of volunteers and fosters, and we take excellent care of our animals. We have never even received a single citation of any sort regarding the 2 years that we have been operating our rescue. There is no discernible reason why this prosecutor is targeting and harassing me that I can think of, other than the fact that I am an American and not a Puerto Rican. He has been attacking me, and at this point, he already got the judge to impose $28,000 in bail, which I had to post 10% of to get out of jail on June 7th. And now I have a hearing on Thursday where the prosecutor is fighting tooth and nail to get my bail revoked and to force me to sit in a Puerto Rican prison until the whole trial is over, which could be months or even a year or more. There is absolutely no justification for this. Puerto Rico law specifically says, and I'm quoting, "Every person arrested for any offense shall be entitled to be released on bail or on a condition or combination of conditions imposed pursuant to Section C of this rule until convicted." And it goes on and on. But in my case, there is absolutely no reason to push for no bail and to hold me in jail for months or years pending this bizarre and bogus prosecution. The judge on the case inexplicably also decided to allow the press into the courtroom, which is extremely unusual in probable cause hearings. Why am I getting all this real special treatment? Especially considering that this exact same prosecutor with the exact same animal cruelty officer and the exact same veterinarian that was sent to my house on the day of the police raid on September 1st, 2023, they were all involved and complicit in the atrocities at the Mayaguez Zoo, which was just recently shut down in 2023, and the hundreds of abused and neglected animals were removed from Puerto Rico and flown to sanctuaries in the U.S. Keep in mind that the zoo was a horrific atrocity with hundreds of documented deaths of animals that went on for decades, highly documented. The USDA gave them failed inspection reports every single time they went there. They had repeat violations over and over and over again. Watch the videos, you'll see. And then after you watch all the horrendous news clips, pictures, and failed inspection reports, including some live zoo animals being fed to the lions at the zoo because they didn't bother to feed the lions real food, and the Puerto Rico government gave the zoo a budget of $1 million despite experts telling them they needed at least a $6 million per year budget. Review all this that comes to follow and then tell me why I, an individual who is affiliated and the president and founder of a non-profit animal rescue that has never received a single citation, a single fine, nothing. Why I'm personally now being charged with 120 crimes, including 57 felonies, when this zoo operated with impunity while animals suffered and died, with the public observing, with well-documented USDA inspection reports, with this exact prosecutor assigned to the zoo case in 2021, and not a single individual was ever prosecuted. Not the man who slit the throats of living deer at the zoo with no anesthesia. That would be a felony in Puerto Rico. You can't just go up to a zoo animal and slit its throat while it's still alive. You also can't feed guinea pigs that were a part of a zoo exhibit to reptiles at the zoo. You also can't take baby lion cubs away from their mothers so that they die and then throw them in the trash. This is all documented. Watch for yourself, and then at the end of this, tell me why I'm being persecuted and prosecuted by these exact individuals who were complacent with the atrocities at the Mayaguez Zoo, and my prosecution's happening in Mayaguez. Tell me the difference. The only difference I see is that I am what they call a North American woman, meaning likely a white woman from the mainland and not one of their own. Not a single one of their own ever gets prosecuted for this. The whole island is full of animal abuse and neglect. Open your eyes. Go there. You'll see it anywhere you go. Get off the beaten path. Anywhere you don't see it is because the Puerto Rican government is paying exterminators $200 to $300 per cat and dog, kitten and puppy to round them up and kill them so tourists don't stop coming to the island. On top of all of this, the same prosecutor, Andres Fernandez, has made a motion to the court to try to put a gag order on me to stop making these videos exposing the truth and telling my side of things, despite his ability to go on the news and say whatever he wants. Plus, every single witness in this case has been on the news talking against me. Does that sound right? What's he so afraid of? You don't want the truth to come out? Everything I say in my videos is 100% supported by evidence. Unlike the hearsay, gossip, rumors, and false allegations against me by my supposed neighbors, which you can go watch a clip on our channel here on YouTube, it's all out there for everybody to see, and that's why he wants to gag me. He says I am insulting and harassing the victims in this case. What victims? I'm charged with animal abuse. I'm certainly not insulting any of my cats that they've taken and killed, now that over 20 of them have died in their care, and their own vet testified that they could not prove any cause of death for the ones that they took from me, many of which were perfectly healthy when they left my house and rescue. So please, watch this video all the way to the end. It's a little bit long, I understand, but there's a lot of information here. The zoo saga went on for more than 15 years of failed inspection reports, dead animals, animals not being fed for days at a time, cockroaches everywhere, everything's broken and rusted and filthy. The animals are living in puddles of mud in their own feces. There's no cleaning, there's no water drainage. The inspection reports repeat the same infractions, the same animal neglect and abuse over and over and over. And this prosecutor was assigned to the case, and not one person to this day has ever been charged regarding the Mayaguez Zoo. So watch this, and please, watch it all the way to the end, and then email the prosecutor. Tell him what you think. He needs to know people are watching. He thinks that I'm a lady all by myself, an American in Puerto Rico, an outsider that nobody's going to stand up for, nobody's going to advocate for, and they'll be able to railroad me illegally down in Puerto Rico without the rest of America seeing how they've been violating my constitutional rights and treating me completely contrary to how they treat everybody else on the island. Actual animal abusers, actual animal hoarders, not me. I run a nonprofit rescue with tons of volunteers, thousands of supporters. We spend thousands of dollars a month on vet bills alone, not to mention top quality food. And they think because they kicked down my door with an illegal search warrant at 5:30 in the morning, with no probable cause, without knocking and entering, without a judge's signature. You kick down the door of any animal rescue at 5:30 in the morning before anyone has been there to clean, to feed, or to water the animals, and it's not going to be at the peak of perfection. But everything had been done the day before. Anyhow, please just watch for yourself and help if you can.
¿Cuántas denuncias hay contra la señora Erickson?
Un total de 120 denuncias. Se está celebrando la vista de determinación de causa para arresto o citación en contra de la señora Erika Marie Erickson.
De esas denuncias, algunas en modalidad grave, otras en modalidad menos grave.
Hay un total de 63 denuncias por delitos menos graves y 57 por violación a delitos graves.
Todas están relacionadas a la ley 154 de maltrato animal.
Todas y cada una de ellas.
On Puerto Rico's far west exists a lost world.
This is a Jurassic Park kind of thing, you know.
Overgrown grass, decrepit buildings, empty animal enclosures.
Everything is rusted, rotted out.
This was the Dr. Juan A. Rivero Zoo, the island's only zoo. But in the last decade, animal care and management suffering. Financial troubles in Puerto Rico made worse after multiple hurricanes decimated the island.
The power doesn't work, the water comes off, you know.
And you have animals that are living here in these conditions.
Yeah, and they have to run on generators. There's no power here since the hurricane.
Pat Craig is on a mission to save all these animals. He runs the massive wild animal sanctuary in Colorado. This rescue calls for the relocation of more than 600 exotic animals.
So you're saying is if you had said no, these animals all likely would have died?
They all would, guaranteed.
In 2017, Hurricanes Irma and Maria halting it all. The zoo closed to the public as complaints of animal mistreatment grew.
So the Department of Justice called and said, you know, hey, it's finally reached this head where if we don't get them out now, there isn't going to be any animals left.
Fast forward to March of this year, when the DOJ and Puerto Rico's government came to an agreement. Drop all probes into the zoo and relocate the animals to zoos and animal sanctuaries across the country.
And a lot of people are upset about that because it seems that the people responsible for this aren't going to be held accountable.
And I agree 100%.
But in this case, as you said, the clock was ticking, so to tie this up in the courts obviously wouldn't have benefited the animals.
You know, negotiating brought it to a much quicker close.
Prompting what Pat believes is the largest move of wildlife in modern U.S. history. Little by little, lions, bears, zebras, and lemurs were relocated to the mainland.
Here you have hippos, Pippo and Cindy. That's the crate they're going to be boarded on en route to their new home.
We were there as the team set out to relocate a rhino, 2 hippos, and a donkey, but perhaps most revered, a 34-year-old, 1,400-pound elephant named Mundi. Adding to the tension, ongoing criticism and violent threats against the relocation of the animals, specifically Mundi, who many consider the jewel of the zoo.
We've had people sneaking into property. We've had people that have posted online to have people come by the thousands and bang pots and pans to scare the animals.
For more than an hour now, crews here have been trying to get this rhino out of its enclosure using heavy machinery to try and get the job done.
With the clock ticking on a crucial must-make flight, the only animal still not in an enclosure is Mundi. The team is doing everything they can to wait her out. And then, the news everyone had been waiting for all day.
After many trials and tribulations, Mundi the elephant.
Flanked by an army of police and federal agents, a caravan departed the zoo. By sunrise, all the animals were boarded onto a chartered flight to Florida. Bittersweet moment for many who realize this may be the last time they see their beloved Mundi on Puerto Rican soil.
It feels like she was more than just an elephant to some people here.
Yeah, it was. There was people crying. It's part of something huge. It's part of...
For the more than 300 winged, scaled, and 4-legged residents still captive, the situation turned from bad to downright desperate.
We saw a zebra that had a horrible wound on her leg and her tail, and she couldn't stand up. We saw a pig that had a skin condition. Her skin was just falling apart.
A mountain lion's untreated cancer had been allowed to spread all over its body.
Seeing the mountain lion suffering the way that he was, that broke my heart. And not being able to... Sorry.
Yeah, help him. Yeah. It was just so evident that this facility was way beyond repair.
The U.S. Department of Justice, which enforces federal animal welfare laws in the states and Puerto Rico, agreed, and in February staged an extraordinary intervention, sending a battalion of agents to the zoo to evacuate every single species to permanent homes on the mainland. To lead this mission, to captain this ark as it were, the DOJ tapped wild animal sanctuary founder Pat Craig. We were there in April to witness the operation. Equal parts military-style logistics and battlefield extraction.
So now, after having seen just a small snapshot of the illegal animal abuse and neglect that went on in broad daylight, 7 days a week, 365 days a year for more than 15 years, tell me why the prosecutor that was appointed on that case, the same one who's now prosecuting me, never brought a single charge against anyone regarding the Mayaguez Zoo atrocities. Tell me why Agent Jose Flores of the Mayaguez Police Department, the animal cruelty officer, never investigated or brought a single charge against the people who were abusing, murdering, neglecting the animals at the Mayaguez Zoo, despite numerous reports every single year from the USDA and thousands of reports for concerned citizens. Why nobody was charged there? And here's the vet from the zoo, Marilyn Arce. They certainly didn't charge her, even though hundreds of animals died on her watch, and the zoo's license from the USDA was actually revoked while she was the vet for the zoo. Eventually, she quit working at the zoo, but while she was there, she was in charge and complicit with the filthy cages, with the failed inspection reports, with the repeat violations that were not fixed from one inspection to the next. Between months and years, the same violations continued to get worse. So nothing was done in that case. But, Marilyn Arce, the vet, here you can see her government contracts. She's been a government contracted veterinarian for many, many years. Of course, as I said, they don't go after their own. And now let's look at their inspection reports. This is where it gets really horrendous. Here is the first inspection report that was received through a public records request from the USDA from June of 2007. All of the camel's hooves are cracked, broken, and chips. These animals do not receive any foot or hoof care at the present time. The dorsum of Mundi the elephant has thickened hyperkeratonic skin and dirt. The facility does perform washes regularly, but only with a sponge and a mop. Additional cleaning equipment, such as but not limited to hardened wire brushes, should be used to remove the skin. The areas where feral dogs have previously entered the zoo have never been identified, so it is essential that the entire perimeter fence be accessible so it can be inspected for defects and or holes where a predator person might be able to gain access and harm the animal collection. The lion and tiger dens do not have any elevated resting surfaces where these animals can lie down other than the concrete floor. Some of these cats are only given access to the public exhibit side where there are suitable elevated and soft substrates every other day. The concrete floors are often damp and can potentially exacerbate or contribute to arthritic conditions and are not consistent with their overall health and well-being. Numerous flies and or mosquitoes were observed in the elephant barn and rhino exhibit. These flies are causing irritation to the rhino's eyes. In addition, many biting ants were also observed in the area where the rhinos are fed. This inspector was bitten several times by biting flies and ants while inspecting these two areas. The next inspection report repeats many of the same violations in the previous report that we just went over. In addition, the licensee has constructed a dock platform area for safe boarding onto a water conveyance to and from the Spider Monkey Island, but the raft that has been cited as unsafe on previous inspections still remains unchanged. The areas where feral dogs have previously entered the zoo has still not been identified. The lion and tiger dens still do not have elevated resting surfaces and have damp concrete floors. Here, another repeat violation is cited. The pools in the rhino area and other pools at the zoo are not draining properly, so they accumulate filthy water full of feces and other garbage and debris, and the animals have to live in it. This has been cited repeatedly. Despite these violations, now in this inspection report, it mentions that the zoo is getting a new hippo exhibit when they can't even care for the animals they already have. This inspection report ends by noting that the zoo's director snuck off and ran away before the inspection could be completed. For some reason, no inspection reports were provided to us from 2008, but we resume in 2009, May of 2009, 2 years after the inspection reports that we just went over, with many repeat violations. The camel's hooves are still cracked. The area is frequently wet, which may contribute to this condition. The black and white llama also has misshapen hooves. The nails of this llama are also deviated. Several expired medications were found in the vet's office. Expired medication are considered adulterated and shall not be administered to animals. The dorsum of mundi still has large amounts of thickened hyperkeratotic skin. The public can put their fingers into the lion enclosure. That doesn't sound like something that an inspector should have to point out to the zoo, that the public should not be able to reach their hands into the lion enclosure. The report goes on to say the metal poles that support the roof over the ocelot exhibit have flaking, pitting, deteriorated rust and may no longer support the roof on the left side. There are several raised screws on the center pole, which has an elevated shelf in the raccoon enclosure. These wooden shelves are also very deteriorated and no longer structurally sound. One of the tiger resting surfaces has large areas of broken and splintered wood, which pose a risk of injury. The sides of the pig exhibit have large gaps between the fence and the ground. It was reported that one of the lions frequently gets out of its exhibit and goes into an adjacent moated non-exhibit area, which is surrounded by walls and a chain link fence. The back wall of the lion exhibit is not sufficient height to reasonably contain the lion. There is a potential risk of injury to the animal from the jump into the moated adjacent area, which is much lower than the exhibit. The lion could also gain access to public areas from the corner of the exhibit where the enclosure wall is very short, in addition to the adjacent moated area which he has already occupied. The Bongo elephant's shelter is currently under renovation, but the animals can still enter it. These areas do not adequately contain the animals, as they could potentially push on the chain link and get out of the enclosure during this temporary renovation time, or allow for easy access of dogs or predators, which frequently gain access to the zoo grounds. The perimeter fence is still not secure in several areas that were inspected. It has been reported that feral dogs still gain access into the zoo. We heard that in a report from 2 years ago. In the past, dogs have been responsible for harming and causing death to the animals. Feral dogs pose the risk of harm or disease to the zoo's animals and should not gain access. As if you need to be told that. Sanitation. Numerous flies were once again observed in and around the rhino exhibit and on the animals. These flies continue to contribute in the eye irritations of the rhinos. The zoo personnel are unable to control the fly population to minimize the effects of the flies on the irritations and stress to the animals. Now we have the next inspection report from June 30th, 2009. The public can reach into the lion exhibit on the right side of the viewing window, just like they could 2 years ago. There's a plastic barrier installed, but it's not of sufficient height to prevent the public from reaching over the barrier and sticking their fingers in. The inspector was able to perform this with very little effort. The public must not be allowed or able to put any body part into enclosures, especially those that house dangerous animals. One of the lions has repeatedly gotten out of the exhibit and jumps into the adjacent area. We already heard about that repeat violation. This report goes on to repeat that the perimeter fence is in disrepair in many locations. Many holes are observed under the fence caused by feral animals digging underneath. The The holes are large enough to allow feral animals to enter and kill the animals at the zoo. There's also an area where someone crashed a backhoe into the fence and never fixed it. The lower portion of the camel exhibit has large areas of muddy standing water which does not drain properly. Another repeat violation. These areas are significantly contributing to the frequent cracking and chipping of the animal's hooves, even though they are now receiving hoof care and trimmings. This has been a violation for over 2 years. A safe and effective program for the control of insects, ectoparasites, and avian and mammalian pests shall be established. Still, the flies are in the rhino enclosure, causing chronic eye irritations. Now we have the next inspection report from a year later in June of 2010. More expired medications found on site. This is prohibited and a repeat violation. One of the shelves used to feed the capuchin monkeys is broken and has an exposed, sharp, and rusted surface that can cause harm to the animals. Additionally, 2 doors and a resting surface inside the bamboon building are broken, exposing a sharp surface which can cause injury to the animals. In the area around the primary enclosure, the capuchins, was found that maintenance is not being done routinely. The plants are overgrown around the enclosures and some are growing into the mesh of the monkey's cage. In the area where the jaguars are kept was found a guillotine door driven by a pulley, and it does not have any type of lock, and the door has a gap where the animal can put its limb under and possibly lift the door up and escape, with a consequent danger for the people and animal. In the fence that divides the 2 llama enclosures was found a portion of mesh that was poorly repaired with sharp tips that can cause injury to animals on both sides of the enclosure. In the exhibition of the bongo antelope was found one of the primary enclosure doors broken and has a separation that allows animals to get its head between the fencing, with the danger for the animals to become trapped and suffer wounds and serious injuries. In the commissary and different parts of the ceiling was observed water damage, cement and paint chunks falling from the ceiling, with the risk of contaminating the animal's food that is prepared there. Drainage. In the rhino exhibit was found that all the areas of the shelter flooded with water, just like 2 years ago. It is important for the health and well-being of the animals to have a dry area that provides shelter from inclement weather. Again, the perimeter fence is in disrepair in many locations of the parking lot. Feral dogs and other animals can enter. It was found that the elephant's food is prepared in a tool and machine shed where it is very unsanitary and the risk of contamination and without proper food handling. Additionally, the refrigerator and freezer in the commissary were found with an accumulation of trash on the floor and accumulation of organic matter on the handles, which is a contamination hazard for animal food that's stored there. In the commissary over the refrigerators and in all corners was observed a great accumulation of cobwebs. In the giraffe service area, rodent feces are in the corners and around the food barrels. 2 exterior and 3 interior black pest control boxes were checked and were apparently not in use for months. They were full of trash and none of the pest control product was inside. The rodent feces contamination around the food storage areas is a risk for the health and well-being of the animals, as rodents are a known source of multiple infectious diseases for other animals. The trailer used to store the hay was found infested with cockroaches. And now we have some pictures of the citations. Here's a filthy, empty rat trap. Here's some general filth on the floors and in the corners with cockroaches and rodent feces. Here's some more filth and more rusted cages and enclosures. Filthy, muddy piles inside of the animal enclosures. Here's one of the many large gaps under the fence where the feral dogs can get in. Cobwebs, spiderwebs everywhere. The Rhino enclosure is just a filthy, muddy pit full of feces and water and mud, as is the camel enclosure and the llama enclosure. And now we have another 2-year gap from 2010 to this inspection of January of 2012, where the door in the giraffe shelter had jagged, rusted edges in the bottom, which may result in injury. More repeat violations. The shelter area under the viewing platform of the rhino exhibit and the area of the tiger outdoor enclosure had water and mud accumulation. This was a focused inspection on prior violations. And here we have pictures. This is the door with the rusty edges. This is more of the mud pits in the rhino shelter. This is the draining problems in the rhino exhibit, which have been going on for many years. Drainage problems in the tiger exhibit. Now we have the next inspection for 4 months later in May of 2012. The chimpanzee moat had accumulation of dirt, debris, and trash, which can clog the drainage system. The door in the giraffe shelter with the jagged, rusty edges still has not been fixed since the last inspection. The guillotine doors in the big cat shelter had rust. The housing facilities need to be maintained. And then we have more repeat violations. The shelter area under the viewing platform of the rhino exhibit and the exhibit moat area had water accumulation due to deficient draining system. Here's the poor rhino area, still completely disgusting with mud pits. Now we have the next inspection, 3 months later, August of 2012. The roof inside the surgery room has a leak and mold was observed inside the lamps and the roof panels. The access to records, as required by law, was not met because the computer in which the medical records were kept was supposedly not available due to a repair that was done outside the facility and no backup system was available. And then we get into more repeat violations. The roof providing shelter from the elements to the environment was rusted and had jagged edges in the capuchin enclosure. If a monkey comes in contact with the sharp rusted edges, it can result in injury. Another repeat violation. The guillotine doors of the big cat shelter area had rust and jagged edges at the bottom. The lion exhibit rockwork had multiple areas of cracked cement. There are rusted bars holding the bottom of the plexiglass and security wire in the back of the enclosure used to prevent the lions from falling into the moat, which were removed and not replaced. The fence around the bongo antelope exhibit was detached at the top in the corner of the entrance gate. The shelter under the viewing platform for the rhino exhibit and moat still had water accumulation due to the deficient draining system. Also, the lion area exhibited a lot of water accumulation due to a clogged drain. The area in the lion enclosures had a lot of water accumulation, and also the bear exhibit and the llama exhibit had draining deficiencies. Food and fecal matter was observed in the dirt and gravel floor of the bear's enclosure, and also the lion exhibit had fecal material accumulation. Employees were working alone in dangerous animal sections, and it is very difficult for just one employee to handle the number of animals by shifting them to their shelters, cleaning the enclosures, feeding the animals, etc. And again, we have supporting pictures. This is the bear enclosure with feces and a deficient drainage system. Then we have the rusted roof on top of the capuchin shelter with jagged edges. Then we have the bear enclosure with fecal matter and food waste all over the ground. And the llama enclosure with the drainage problem. And more of the llama enclosure with the water accumulation at the drinking water station, which can cause hoof problems. And this is the extremely disgusting lion enclosure with the drain deficiency. fecal material accumulation mixed with the dirt and retained water inside the enclosure. Here's more of the lion enclosure with the rusted metal frame at the bottom of the wire panels. Cracked cement on a man-made rock inside the lion exhibit. Rusted shelter door in the lion exhibit. And we got the rusted tiger exhibit shelter door with jagged edges. Followed by the drainage issue in the filthy, disgusting rhino exhibit, which has been a muddy pit for years on end. And then we have the lamp with the mold inside the surgery room, which does not happen overnight. And the surgery room with the moldy lamp and ceiling panels. And now the drain issue in the lion exhibit with the rusted frame and the plexiglass bottom. I wouldn't want to live in there, much less walk through it to even take a picture. Disgusting. And here's the next inspection report 4 months later in December of 2012 with more repeat violations. The roof inside the surgery room has a leak and mold was observed inside the lamps and the roof panels. The guillotine doors of the big cat shelter still have rust and jagged edges. The lion exhibit rockwork still has many areas of cracked cement and rusted bars holding the bottom of the security glass, and there is a cracked security glass facing the public. And of course, the poor rhinoceros area still has water accumulation due to a deficient draining system, which has been going on for years and can cause many health problems such as foot issues, gastrointestinal disease, odor, vermin, etc. And now we have the pictures. Here's the cracked glass door in the lion exhibit, followed by the rhino shelter with the water accumulation and filth, and the roof leaks into the surgery area lamp, and the moldy ceiling tiles with water damage, and the rusted gate at the entrance to the lion shelter is still not repaired. And now we have the next inspection report 5 months later in April of 2013 with a bunch of repeat violations. The roof inside the surgery room still has multiple leaks and mold in the ceiling and the lamps and the roof panels. The AC unit is not working properly and water condensation is dripping on the roof panels. The wire mesh above the baboon exhibit has multiple tears that have been repaired, but it keeps breaking in new places. The primates have been placed in the shelter area temporarily in order to avoid any escape incident. The indoor shelter area used as a primary enclosure for the baboons had dirt and algae accumulation on the walls and wire mesh on the floor. The door leading from the shelter area to the exhibit area of the tiger enclosures still has rust and jagged edges on the vertical bars. And now we have the supporting pictures here with the shelter area for the baboons are kept due to the bad condition of the wire mesh. Walls have algae and dirt. Here's the inside of the baboon shelter where the walls are full of filth and algae. They've obviously not been cleaned in a long time. And the door leading from the tiger shelter to the exhibition area continues to get worse and worse at every inspection. And here you see the ceiling and the surgery area continuing to get worse from water damage and mold. And now we have the next inspection report 4 months later in August of 2013, full of more repeat violations. The roof inside the laboratory room has multiple leaks and rust was observed on top of the cabinet in the lab area, and water drops were falling on top of the counter. The AC unit is not working. The CBC and biochemistry equipment has not been installed due to the roof leak. 2 tigers, aged 13 years old, appeared underweight because the ribs, hips, and vertebral column bones could be easily observed. There were no recent weight records, which may indicate how much weight the animals lost, and no recent blood work in order to determine any underlying cause of the weight loss or disease process leading to weight loss. According to the attending veterinarian, one of the tigers has been treated for thyroid problems, but no follow-up blood work has been done. The other tiger has not had a recent proper blood work. And as we saw last time, the outdoor shelter area used for the primary enclosure for the olive baboons had dirt and algae accumulation on the walls and floor behind and under the food rack. The area of the lion, jaguar, and bear exhibits continue to have water accumulation due to a deficient draining system. The lions are fed a commercial diet on the floor of the outdoor exhibit. There is no food receptacle. The food is thrown on the floor, and it was raining, so the food got contaminated with muddy water. The male lion was trying to eat the food that was under the water, but didn't like it and left it in the muddy water. In order to prevent gastrointestinal disease and provide high-quality food, wholesome, palatable, and free from contamination and of sufficient quantity and nutritive value to maintain all animals in good health, contamination must be avoided and a proper sanitized food receptacle shall be provided. 2 male lions, 1 adult and 1 juvenile, were housed together in the same exhibit with 4 young females, and they were trying to establish dominance and would fight and not eat while the females went into heat. None of the lions were sterilized. The male behavior led to weight loss in a short period of time, according to the attending veterinarian. And here's the sad pictures of one of the underweight tigers. And here he is up close where you can see all his bones. The disgusting water leak and the rust over the cabinets in the lab and surgery area. More cabinets with rust in the lab and surgery area. This is the macaque shelter used as a primary enclosure with algae and dirt on the floor, indicative of lack of sanitation. Here's the other tiger, the one with the thyroid problem that is thinner than normal, and no follow-up tests have been done. Here's the lion exhibit, continuing to be filthy and rusty and full of water. And here the inspection report goes on to state that the indoor shelter area of the chimpanzee had rusted expanded metal and algae accumulation on the walls and floor due to lack of cleaning. And the areas of the lion, rhino, and bear exhibit continue to have water and mud and filth accumulation due to deficient draining systems and poor maintenance of the draining system. And here is the chimpanzee shelter with the rusted metal door and algae on the walls and floor, followed by the water accumulation in the moat of the rhino exhibit due to clogging of the drainage system with leaves. Here's the clogged drain in the lion exhibit, and the mud accumulation in the mud exhibit due to a deficient draining system, followed by a black bear enclosure with draining problems. And now we have the next inspection report 3 months later in December of 2013 with many repeat violations. The AC unit is still not working in the veterinary surgical clinic building. An unexperienced keeper was sent to the impala enclosure where 2 males were kept in separated enclosures. The inexperienced keeper left the door slightly open, and the older male impala went into the enclosure next door and fighting with the younger male through the fence. The end result of the handling was the death of the old impala, died through negligent handling. The shelter housing facility of the baboons had a deficient lighting supply, making it difficult to even conduct an inspection or to observe the animals. Continuing with more repeat violations, the indoor shelter area of the chimpanzee had rusted expanded metal and algae accumulation on the walls and floor. Also, the spider monkey shelter enclosure had porous floors and algae accumulation. The chain link fence in the Ammotragus lervia Audad exhibit was loose at the bottom. While I was conducting the inspection, the male pushed the fence and escaped. He was rapidly returned to his enclosure by zoo personnel and locked in a shelter. The ventilation windows in the shelter building were rusted and had jagged edges. One of the tiger enclosures had an umbrella-type shelter, but the bottom was wet because of running water from the rain and from a water pipe. The tiger could not lay on the wet, muddy ground, and there was no additional sheltered area. The rat bait boxes were empty and contained leaves and dirt. Rat droppings were observed in the camel and deer food storage area. And here we have a picture of the chimpanzee shelter enclosure with algae on the floor and walls and a rotted wood platform, followed by rusty wire mesh and rusty platform in the chimpanzee exhibit, and a rusty gate in the spider monkey shelter and algae accumulation on the floor, porous floor and algae accumulation in this extremely filthy spider monkey shelter. And the air conditioning in the vet clinic, surgical area, and lab is still not working. Now we have the next inspection report from 6 months later in June of 2014. I have to warn you, this is the most disturbing and graphic of all of the inspection reports. This report starts off with a bunch of expired medications and expired suture materials, which are illegal to use at the zoo on the animals. The refrigerator that is in use to store vaccines and medications had frozen in liquid condensate. Several of the boxes and vials were very wet. This method of storage does not minimize possible contaminations of these products. A baboon, a coatimundi, and puma were euthanized on January 30th, 2014, utilizing a bottle of euthanasia which had expired in October of 2013. The attending veterinarian knew the drug was expired but had no other alternative to humanely euthanize the animals. A puma, coatimundi, and baboon were euthanized because they were not fit for exhibit. The medical records did not list any recent illness or workups, and the documentation does not indicate any problems that would lead to the decision for euthanasia. Several mammals, camel, kangaroo, have coccidia-associated clinical signs and illness and have required veterinary care. These animals are in close proximity to the enclosures of birds. These are routinely dewormed, but the medications used are ineffective in treating or controlling coccidia. The animals were not tested for any parasites by the veterinarian. And now we get to the worst part. Regulated species, deer, that have been on exhibition have been euthanized by cutting their jugular veins with a knife and then fed to the big cats. Cutting an animal's throat with a knife without first stunning them is not considered humane and is not an accepted method of euthanasia. Guinea pigs that were also on exhibit were fed alive to snakes as food. All regulated species which have been on exhibit shall not be used to feed another species unless they're properly euthanized according to accepted methods by the American Veterinary Medical Association. I mean, do you gotta tell people this, that you can't feed some of the zoo animals alive to other animals? You have to tell these people that you can't just slit a deer's throat and throw it to the lions? That that's not an acceptable method of conducting a zoo? I mean, honestly, these people are inspected every couple months, and this is the behavior they engage in nonetheless. Citation after citation after citation. This is criminal. And who's there to stop them? Definitely not Prosecutor Andres Fernandez, who's prosecuting me. And of course, we have more repeat violations. The shelter housing facility of the baboons, patas, and African gray monkey had deficient light intensity, making it difficult to conduct inspections or observe the animals. Several primate shelter facilities, lemur, spider monkeys, baboons, etc., were observed to have green algae on the floor, dirt, leaves, etc., which indicate they are not being properly and regularly cleaned. One gate on the perimeter fence near the hippo exhibit is not locked. The hinge on the opposite side only consists of a twisted, pliable wire which doesn't provide any security. The attending veterinarian indicated that this gate was used to accommodate the increase in attendance from a festival in January of 2014, and it has not been locked since then. The gate is accessible to the public because it's located adjacent to a parking area. The perimeter fence should be secured at all times to prevent animals from escaping and the public from accessing the animals in order to protect the animals and the public from injury. Multiple enclosures, llamas, bongos, camels, big cats, etc., were observed with food, hay, and fruits on the dirt floor with mammal and avian fecal matter in close proximity, which may cause the food to become contaminated. Please don't throw the food on the ground. The water bowls containing drinking water for the llama, bongo, camels, etc. were contaminated by birds roaming in the area, ducks, peacocks, etc. Here's where the lights in several enclosures were not working. There is hay on the dirt floor in close proximity to fecal matter in several enclosures. Hay on the dirt floor and also mud and peacocks. The peacocks got into the water bowl, making it turbid and contaminated. Believe it or not, all these violations, including feeding animals from one exhibit to other animals at the zoo, completely illegal. The zoo's still up and running 3 months later for another inspection in September of 2014. The backside of the jaguar, squirrel, monkey, sloth, paca, raccoon, and pig enclosures do not have a complete barrier fence. This area is on a hill, but the inspector was able to easily climb and walk up the animal enclosures with little effort. Some of the wood on the platforms in the chimpanzee and squirrel monkey exhibits were deteriorated and flaking apart. The exhibit side of the chimpanzee enclosure had some protruding screws on the platform that were left when the wood deteriorated. The chimp platform metal framing had flaking rust. The wire mesh covering the drain pipe in the dry moat also has deteriorated, leaving jagged edges. The ends of the metal hose clamps holding the PVC pipe which surrounds the suspended cables has sharp edges. These primates can and do have contact with these surfaces. And more repeat violations. The chimpanzee exhibit was observed to have black and green algae on the floor, empty concrete pool, and back wall. Large accumulations of dirt and leaves were in the dry moat, and dirt and algae were observed in the inside of the small concrete pool. Cobwebs, dirt, and leaves were also seen hanging from the skylight in the dens. These observations indicate these areas are either not properly or regularly cleaned. The algae on the floor can become slippery, which can cause injury to primates. The skylights in the tiger and lion shelters had cobwebs, dirt, and leaves hanging. The plastic lens covers for the lights in the commissary were cracked and had dead flies in them. These covers now have gaps which are directly above the food preparation table, which potentially would allow these flies to fall into the food below. And here we have pictures of the exposed and rusted screws, the rusted frame and rotten wood in the squirrel, monkey, sloth, paca enclosures, followed by exposed rusted screws and rotten wood in the chimpanzee enclosure. The metal frame is painted at the top, but flaky rust was observed on the bottom. The rusted drain cover with sharp edges, and a moat drain has leaves and dirt. Exposed rusted screws where a wooden frame used to be in the chimpanzee exhibit area. Green and black algae on the floor of the chimpanzee exhibit and on the wall. Skylight with cobwebs, leaves, and dirt in the chimpanzee shelter area. Filthy. Oh, I spoke too soon. Look at this filth. Small water pool with leaves and dirt in the chimpanzee exhibit area. Metal hose clamps around PVC pipes that have sharp edges at their ends. And here we have the next inspection. 4 months later, January 2015. One of the tigers, 14 years old, appears to be underweight. The hip bones and shoulder blades appear prominent with diminished muscle mass over these areas. The abdominal area also appeared to be tucked in. The facility is unable to weigh this animal to determine if there is a continual weight loss and or body muscle mass. The last blood work and physical exam were performed on August of 2013, 2 years ago, at which time this animal appeared normal. The veterinarian has increased the amount of food to be given to the animal, but this does not appear to resolve or stabilize this issue, as there are no weights being performed. In order to diagnose an underlying cause or disease, appropriate physical exam, blood work, and specialized tests must be conducted so that a treatment plan can be implemented. Suture materials, heparin vials, xylazine vials were expired. Again, the olive baboon enclosure, wire mesh was broken in at least 2 different places, which could lead to the animals getting through these openings and escaping from the enclosure. Repeat violations. The wire mesh covering the drain pipe and the dry moat in the chimpanzee enclosure continues to have deteriorated leaves and jagged edges. The ends of the metal hose clamps holding the PVC pipe which surrounds the suspended cables also continues to have sharp edges. No corrections have taken place since the last inspection. These primates can and do have contact with these surfaces. More repeat violations. The chimpanzee exhibit was observed to again have black and green algae on the floor, empty concrete pool and back wall. Large accumulations of dirt and leaves were in the dry moat. Dirt and algae continued to be observed inside the empty small concrete pool. There were hay and dry leaves scattered on the floor of the exhibit, which appeared to be in the enclosure for a couple of days. These observances indicate that these areas are either not properly or regularly cleaned. The algae, hay, and leaves on the floor can become slippery, which can cause injury to the primates and does not allow for a thorough and complete cleaning. Food was stored inside the cooler directly under a sign that says "Do not put food under this area." This is a drainage pipe under the cooler pan in this area, which creates condensate and water drips on the top of the food, causing contamination of the food. The skylights in the tiger and lion shelters had large accumulations of cobwebs, dirt, and leaves hanging, indicative that these areas are not being cleaned frequently and or with regularity. The plastic lens covers for the lights in the commissary continue to be cracked and had dead flies in them. These covers now have holes, which were directly above the food preparation table, which would potentially allow these dead flies to fall into the food below. The shelter area of the camels, sheep, and sable antelope had large accumulations of spider webs and dirty floors, also indicating these areas had not been properly and or frequently cleaned. The cougar exhibit had a strong smell of urine that was noticeable from approximately 10 feet from their enclosure. Millipede worms, a dead cockroach, and dirt was observed on the floor of the commissary. Excessive dust was observed on top of the commissary cabinets. A box of nails was observed inside the hay storage container, which further indicates these areas are not being properly cleaned and or maintained. Apparently during the holidays, the animals do not need to be fed or cared for because it appears that during the holidays, the numbers and hours worked by the employees is reduced, which has an impact in husbandry practices in several areas as evidenced by the housekeeping and cleaning repeat violations during the inspections. And once again, here's a picture of the cracked and broken light above the food preparation area. Cockroach and millipedes inside the floor of the commissary. Draining cover rusted with sharp edges in the chimp dry moat. Green and black algae on the moat wall and floor. Leaves and dirt on the floor of the chimp primary enclosures of the chimps. Green and black algae on the walls and the floor. Accumulation of leaves and dirt in the chimp dry moat. Skylights in the tiger and lion shelter with accumulation of leaves, dirt, and cobwebs due to improper cleaning. Tiger looks underweight. A complete physical exam and blood test is needed. Here's the next inspection 4 months later, May of 2015. One lion had recent red scratches on his face. Flies were observed on the wounds and veterinary care was not provided. Proper veterinary care needs to be provided to avoid infection of the scratches and wounds. Repeat violations. The African green monkey pathos monkey enclosure wire mesh was broken, which could lead to animals getting through these openings and escaping. There was a crack in a man-made rock which had exposed yellow foam underneath, and the animals may eat it. The existing barrier located at the right side of the capuchin enclosure is 33 inches away. The public can reach over the barrier and touch the enclosure. The chimpanzee area had a small gate as part of the barrier which was not secure on one side. The public had access through it to the enclosure mesh. These areas are not constantly monitored by zoo employees. The barriers do not prevent the public from having contact with these animals. It also does not protect the animals or the public from potential injury. The elevated platforms in the exhibit dens had clawed and chewed wood which created splinters at the ends of the resting platforms. These splinters could potentially injure the animals. The food bucket was stored inside the freezer directly under areas with a sign, "Do not put buckets of food here," where frozen concentrate fell on top of the boxes of meat, and the bucket of meat was covered in ice. Several bags of dry pelleted feed were torn open in a manner which usually indicates rodents. This was further evidenced by the observance of mice feces on and around the bags of pelleted feed. Floors and racks were also covered with accumulations of feed, which does not minimize the attraction of rodents and the contamination of feed from their urine and feces. The sliding gate located near the elephant enclosure was open. This sliding gate serves as a portion of the zoo perimeter fence. There were several thick vines intertwined through the gate, which prevents the gate from opening or closing. The inspector could not close this gate. This is indicative that the gate remains permanently open. The current condition of the fence does not protect the animals in the facility from animals or people going through it and having contact with the animals. It does not function as a secondary containment system if an animal should get out of its enclosure. The gate should remain closed at all times unless in use. The torn open bags of feed may be contaminated by feces and urine of rodents, as evidenced by mice droppings on and around the bags of feed. There is no procedure that ensures these bags of feed are discarded and not fed to the regulated animals. This does not ensure the food which is given to the animals is wholesome and free from contamination by vermin and bacteria. Disease, parasites, bacteria, etc. may be carried in the feces or urine of the rodents that could negatively impact the health of the animals. Repeat violation. Excessive dust was again observed on top of the commissary cabinets and on top of the cooler. The two metal racks where the food is placed had accumulation of a dark, sticky, greasy material, indicating the lack of frequent and proper cleaning and sanitation. And here we have a picture of the food rack with the dark, greasy material indicating improper cleaning. Ice accumulation on top of meat boxes due to condensate in the freezer. Cabinet with dust and dead insects. Cooler with stored boxes and dust. Feed bags torn open, most likely by mice. Mice fecal matter on top of the feed bags. Feed scattered on the floor. Barrier close to the primate enclosure, which is reachable by the public. Yellow foam exposed in a man-made rock. Big cat platform with splintered and chewed wood. Lion had red scratches on his face. Barrier gate at the chimpanzee exit was open. Here we have the next inspection report 3 months later, August of 2015. The adult male lion had small areas of hair loss and red raw skin on all 4 legs. The attending veterinarian informed inspectors that he had already received the animal health reports today, and he was not informed of these lesions, which appeared to be affecting the lion for more than just 1 day. Repeat violations. All of the meat inside the walk-in freezer was soft to the touch, indicating it was not frozen. The temperature logs showed consistent temperatures above 32 degrees Fahrenheit since August 1st of 2015. The licensee indicated this freezer was repaired on August 6th and again yesterday. The temperature was above 50 degrees Fahrenheit in the freezer. There was also dirt, frozen dried blood, whole fish, and pieces of meat on the floor and between the pallet slats in the freezer. The chest freezer also had dried frozen blood, an unbagged whole fish which was frozen within the ice frost crystallization in the bottom of this freezer. The freezer shall also be cleaned as often as necessary to prevent food spoilage and contamination. All frozen meat should be maintained at or below freezing temperatures. We gotta say this? The freezer has to be able to freeze the meat? Another repeat violation. Excessive dust, dirt, insects, discarded equipment, and a plastic water bottle were again observed on top of one of the commissary cabinets and or the top of the walk-in cooler. This was a focused inspection to re-inspect all of the non-compliances and non-compliant areas identified in the last inspection and look at all the repeat violations. And here we have pictures of the sores on the skin of the lion. This is the left forelimb, spot on the right forelimb of the male lion, chest freezer with bloody waste and fish leftovers. Pieces of old meat and fish between the wood of pallets inside the walk-in freezer. Dust, dirt, dead insects, and discarded material on top of one of the commissary cabinets. Dust and discarded materials on top of the walk-in cooler. Here we have the next inspection 3 months later, November of 2015. The Patas Monkey Shelter had an accumulation of plastic bottles, cardboard boxes that are used for produce, and other items in one of the stalls of the building. There was dirt and cockroaches under the boxes. Cardboard boxes used to transport produce and other food items may harbor pests and facilitate the transport of these pests from the food prep area to the animal areas. The Sable Antelope Shelter has a door with a glass panel that was previously cracked by the animal exhibiting aggressive behavior when there's someone in the caretaker hallway. This animal has a history of aggressive behavior and butts his head against the door when someone's in the hallway. The glass poses a risk of injury if it should shatter upon the impact with this animal. The Sugar Glider Den box has chewed edges with splinters which may cause injuries. The wall of the freezer near the door and the boxes of food near this area had large buildups of ice condensate on them. Flying insects were observed inside the feed storage in a plastic container in the food prep area. Rodent and cockroach feces were observed on the floor and on a few bags in the dry feed storage container. There was an open bag of fish and reptile food that can attract rodents and other pests to the area. The tiger and rhino exhibits had water and mud accumulations in the moats due to a buildup of dirt and leaves blocking the drainage system. The camel shelter area had mud and water accumulation on the floor where the animals are housed. Raw meat was observed on wet concrete floors in the lion and tiger dens. These floors are worn and porous and can no longer be sanitized, which does not minimize the contamination of meat by bacteria and or embedded in dirt in the concrete. Bacterial or dirt contamination can spoil the meat, which may affect the health of these animals. Elevated feeding platforms are available but not being used. They simply continue to throw the meat directly on the floor as they've been cited for previously. The drinking water for the tigers and sable antelope were dirty and muddy, again. Excessive dust, dirt, insects, and discarded equipment and plastic bottles were again observed on top of the walk-in cooler. The floor in the kitchen area had an accumulation of insects on the floor behind a movable shelving storage cabinet. The camel barn had pallets with plastic food containers on top. When the pallets were lifted, dirt, caked feed, and cockroaches were observed around the area. Cockroaches were also observed around the hay in this area. The areas adjacent to the hay storage container structure had long-standing accumulations of hay in front of the entry door, as evidenced by observations of plants growing within the hay. Pallets scattered on the side and metal roofing material were located around the area of the storage container. These areas can attract and harbor pests and vermin reproduction. Cockroaches were observed in the camel barn, and rodent droppings were observed in the feed storage container structure. In order to prevent food contamination by vermin and rodents, a safe and effective program for the control of pests shall be established and maintained, as has been brought up in every inspection since 2007. And here we have a picture of the disgusting moat draining system being blocked by mud and leaves. The hay at the entrance door, pallets and roof material scattered all over the hay container. Insects and dirt on the kitchen floors, disgusting. Muddy floors in the camel barn stalls, which is probably why the camels continue to have cracked hooves. Caked feed, hay, and cockroaches were observed crawling after the pallets were lifted in the camel barn. Food served on the floor of the tiger and lion dens. Trash inside the Patas monkey shelter. And here we have the next inspection report. 3 months later, February of 2016. 3 bottles of expired medications, 1 vial of rabies vaccine, and 2 bottles of Gentocin injectable. The puma and lion exhibit had public barriers that were deficient. The puma barrier had a gap that the public could easily walk towards the enclosure and reach the animals. The lion exhibit barrier on the right side does not extend downward sufficiently, which allows the public to reach under this barrier and put fingers through this enclosure that contain dangerous animals. These areas do not have an employee to monitor the public at all times. The floor of the baboon overhang shelter structure has worn down, exposing rough rock from the concrete mix in 2 areas near the food receptacles. The current condition of the concrete is now porous. There was an odor emanating from this area, which may be due to the porous nature of the concrete and its inability to be completely cleanable and or sanitized. More repeat violations. There has been no correction to the sugar glider den box since the last inspection. The sugar glider den box continues to have chewed edges with splinters, which may cause injury. The lion den area has a metal chute where the weighing scale is kept. The lower horizontal metal bars of the chute are completely deteriorated with rust in various areas that no longer make it structurally sound. The wall near the freezer door ceiling, hanging down from the blower fans and on the boxes of food near this area, had large buildups of ice condensate on them. There was a greater amount of condensate observed since the last inspection, and there appears that there has not been any corrective action taken. The freezer gasket was in disrepair, which might be contributing to the greater amount of ice condensate observed. A hole was observed in the roof of the hay storage container, which allows rainwater, leaves, insects, vermin, etc. to contaminate and or wet the hay. The hay underneath the hole has debris which had fallen from the hole in the roof. The drinking water for the tigers continues to be dirty. In the camel and sable barn, when the pallets were lifted, dirt-caked feed and cockroaches were again observed around the area. These areas adjacent to the hay storage container structure still has a long-standing accumulation of hay in front of the entry door. Pallets scattered on the side were located on the area of the storage container. There was a large accumulation of pelleted feed scattered in front of the door of the container. another repeat violation. Cockroaches were observed under the pallets in the camel barn and sable barn. A rat and mouse were also observed in these areas. The mouse was observed inside a bait box that contained no bait. And here we have a picture of the filthy floor under the pallets in the camel and sable barn that was not cleaned. Rat observed roaming the camel barn. Rusted metal bars in the lion and tiger chute. Hay accumulation and cockroaches under pallets in the camel and sable barn. Rat bait boxes that are empty. The sugar glider box that's all chewed up and hazardous. And now we have the next inspection, 3 months later, May of 2016. Yes, we are nearing the end. They are eventually going to lose their license after about 10 years of this nonsense. The bongo was lying down in a corner of its enclosure. When I approached him, he started to stand and began walking away with his right leg lifted in the air, indicating there was a possible problem at the distal part of the limb. Upon examination of the records, it was found that the issue started in February 2016, 3 months ago, and there has been intermittent treatment without a definitive diagnosis and without resolution of the issue. Currently, the animal is on an oral supplement of hyaluronic, which does not appear to be helping too much. An appropriate method to diagnose and treat the condition causing the lameness shall be implemented to be corrected immediately. There is a metal and wood table with discarded material at the entrance of the elephant barn. The table is in complete disrepair and the discarded material is on top and under the table, which is used to put the food on when it arrives in the barn to feed the elephant. Discarded material shall be properly disposed of to avoid the reproduction of pests which may cause disease and health issues to the animals. And here's a picture of the poor bongo antelope with his right hind leg lifted and not being able to bear any weight on it. Here's the next inspection, 20 days after, to check on the injured bongo antelope. He was laying down inside the shelter when I approached the bongo. He started to stand and began walking away with his right leg lifted in the air, indicating a possible problem at the distal part of the limb. According to the attending veterinarian, treatment was started yesterday with antibiotics 20 days after the last inspection. But still, there is no definitive diagnosis and no way to know if the current treatment will be effective. Currently, the animal is under an oral supplement for arthritic conditions, which does not appear to be helping much. There is a procured request for X-ray services according to the vet, which has not been approved at this moment and which is one diagnostic tool to determine the cause of the lameness. An appropriate method to diagnose and treat the condition causing the lameness shall be implemented since the animal didn't appear to have any improvement. And here's a picture of the poor bongo, still injured almost a month after the last inspection. This has yet to take place despite the 4.5 duration of this condition. An appropriate method to diagnose the problem has not yet taken place. Here's another inspection a month later to follow up on the bongo. The bongo has been non-weight bearing on his right rear leg since February of 2016. Over 4 months, the veterinarian has been treating the animal medically with no visible signs of improvement. On June 8th, the zoo received an estimate for radiographical services. The zoo does not have a radiograph machine and has an appointment for the animal to receive radiographs on June 28th. The delay in obtaining radiographs is due to the fact the zoo must go through an approval system for purchases of supplies, equipment, and services, which can frequently be a lengthy process. Welcome to Puerto Rico. This current ordering process does not facilitate any animal getting the necessary veterinary care or diagnostic workups to relieve pain and suffering in a timely manner if the zoo does not have prior approval for the supplies, equipment, or services in place or already has it at the zoo. The zoo must establish and maintain programs of adequate veterinary care to include appropriate equipment and services to comply with the provisions of the Animal Welfare Act, regulations, and standards. Repeat violation. There does not appear to be any improvement in the bongo. His right rear leg is still not weight-bearing. The veterinarian has changed the course of treatment without any definitive diagnosis due to lack of radiographs, which might provide the etiology for this lameness. The bongo has been receiving medications, but the condition does not seem to be improving. Radiographs are scheduled 1 week from today. And here's a picture of the poor bongo antelope continuing to suffer in pain. And here's one of the large steps down in front of the bongo shelter structure that he has to navigate with cracked and broken concrete. And this is the only entry and exit into the bongo shelter, which is level to the ground surface. The area is covered with wet clay mud, making this area extremely slippery for this animal, which may be how it injured its leg or how it continues to remain injured. Next inspection report a month later, July 28th, 2016. The bongo is doing better after treatment, but is still favoring the right rear leg due to a possible chronic arthritis, according to the radiographs interpreted by the attending veterinarian. The zoo still does not have an efficient mechanism to procure goods and services when it is required in order to diagnose and treat animals, because efficiency is not a word familiar to the government of Puerto Rico. The procurement delay is due to the fact that the zoo must go through an approval system for purchases of supplies, equipment, and services, which can frequently be a lengthy process. The current ordering process does not facilitate any animal getting the necessary veterinary care and/or diagnostic workups to relieve pain and suffering in a timely manner if the zoo does not have prior approval for the supplies, equipment, or services, or already has it at the zoo. Next inspection report 3 months later, October 2016. The rhino has what appears to be an oval mass approximately 1.5 inches under the skin fold of the right front elbow. 50% of the mass was slightly pink in color. The attending veterinarian and caretaker was unaware of this growth. The mass needs to be examined to make a diagnosis and treat appropriately. An assessment of the mass to determine if the growth interferes with movements of the animal shall also be made. A mechanism of direct and frequent communication is required so that the timely and accurate information on problems of animal health and well-being is conveyed to the attending veterinarian by the caretakers. There was a missing section of the chain link barrier fence which gives the public easy and direct access to the bear and capuchin enclosures. There was a lack of drainage and mud accumulations in several areas within the camel, aoudad, and rhino exhibits. Again, the animals have to walk through these areas to gain access to their shelters. The animals had mud accumulation on their lower legs, so the underlying skin and hooves could not be completely visually inspected. The mud that was seen on the limbs of these animals may cause infections and lameness with resulting pain to the affected animals. The excessive mud and moisture observed on the camels may be a contributing cause for the cracked hooves observed for the last 9 years of inspection reports that I have just reviewed. Cockroaches were seen dead and alive in the feed storage trailer. Again, there were also dead cockroaches in the camel barn feed storage area. There were open bags of pelletized feed in the storage trailer. These open bags of food serve to attract vermin and cockroaches and do not minimize these pests which contaminate these open bags of feed. The established pest control program does not appear to be effective in controlling the cockroach populations in these areas, as seen by years of inspection reports. A safe and more effective program for the control of cockroaches shall be established and maintained. The area should be cleaned more frequently in order to remove dead roaches, and all open bags should be placed in containers for better insect control. Next inspection report, 4 months later, February 2017. There is a new attending veterinarian, the same veterinarian who came to my house during the police raid on my rescue and wanted to criticize the care of the animals at my rescue. Listen to what she's got going on. The other full-time veterinarian resigned. In the case of a part-time attending vet, formal arrangements shall include a written program of veterinary care and regularly scheduled visits to the premises. Several medications and suture materials were again expired. The refrigerator used to store medications had dirt, frozen, and liquid condensate. The method of storage does not minimize possible contamination. The cougar was observed to be pacing and panting. These behaviors were observed while directly observing the animal and after we moved to inspect other nearby enclosures. The cougar is being housed in a small enclosure which only offers a minimal amount of space to make species-appropriate behaviors. The cougar appears to be exhibiting signs of distress or an underlying veterinary care condition. One of the tigers is thin. This tiger is currently under observation but has not received any laboratory or test examinations since 2015, 2 years ago. These two animals must be completely evaluated by the new attending veterinarian. The enclosure in the island where the spider monkeys are located needs to be repaired or replaced. The metal gates and metal bars, which are rusted at the same time, it should be cleaned and painted. The area around the baboon enclosure had an accumulation of wastewater, old food, and a considerable amount of flies was observed on the food. The accumulation of wastewater and old food provides an excellent area for mosquito and biting fly reproduction, which can also cause additional stress, pain, and irritations to the primates. The lion exhibit previously had hot wire grass along the border of the enclosure facing the moat, which was removed. The zoo personnel were aware of its removal until the inspection of this area. Lions were observed walking on top of the moat wall and standing on top of the rockwork inside the enclosure, looking towards a sable antelope standing on the other side of the moat. There was no hot wire to deter the lions from trying to jump into the moat to get to the antelope. If a lion should fall into the moat, it could injure itself or try to climb up and enter the antelope exhibit. The ocelot exhibit had a tree limb used for enrichment that was rotted. Termite tunnels were observed on the back wall towards the upper portion of the tree limb in this exhibit, which may be contributing to the deteriorated wood that was observed. The tree limb poses a threat of injury to the animal exhibited because it is no longer structurally sound to support the weight of the cat. The camel area had an area where the shelter roof and gutters were full of leaves, dirt, etc., which is now clogging the drainage system again. This also puts extra weight on the gutters as well as the roofs and could potentially fall on top of the animals if they're in the area. The lack of proper gutter drainage that is observed is contributing to the mud and standing water directly below these gutters. There's also erosion in this area which exposed the chain link along the ground, creating spaces and gaps which could entrap animals walking too close to the fence. There is water leaking from the roof and the feed and hay storage areas in the camel deer barn, which could be a source of food contamination. Water was observed on the floor and on top of a food container, and it was dripping from the roof. The metal fasteners used to secure the lower portion of the chain link fence on the stable antelope enclosure were detached at the bottom along the service road in some areas. The gap observed could also be an entrapment for the antelope in the enclosure. Repeat violations, standing water, and mud accumulations were observed in several enclosures. Rhino, aoudad, camels, etc. The animals had to walk through the mud to go to the shelter, and their lower legs and hooves were again observed to have mud accumulations. Mud and moist conditions in the hoof and skin may cause bacterial infections and other irritations, leading to lameness, pain, and or stress of the affected animals. The perimeter fence was down in some areas along the road near the camel exhibit due to tree falls. The fence must be constructed and maintained in good repair so it protects the animals in the facility by restricting animals and unauthorized persons from going through it or under it and having contact with the animals in the facility, and so it can function as a secondary containment system for the animals in the facility. There was some boxes of meat inside the freezer under the condenser unit, again with ice condensation on top of them. Ice condensate may contaminate the food to feed the animals. The water in the hippo exhibit again was cloudy. LJ was observed on the rockwork in the middle of the pool. In order to keep the water clean, a water filtration system shall be installed, or more frequent water changes and washing should be instituted as necessary to maintain the pool in a clean fashion at all times. There was a strong smell of urine in the ocelot and puma area, which can indicate that more frequent cleaning should be performed in order to eliminate the strong urine odor in this area. Repeat violation. The premises around the commissary had empty food boxes, discarded food, etc., which may attract pests. Accumulations of trash shall be placed in designated areas and cleared as necessary to protect the health of the animals. The unused chute in the zebra impala exhibit is in disrepair. Animals have direct access to the chute and its mechanisms. This could be a possible area of entrapment or injury. The roof of the veterinary clinic is leaking and the ceiling panels were water-stained and moldy. Again, including the area directly above the surgical table, which would expose any animal undergoing surgery to increased risk of infections. The surgical room should be as sterile and clean as possible. Repeat violation. There were multiple rat bait boxes inspected throughout the zoo that did not have any rat bait. Termite tunnels were observed in multiple areas and enclosures which eat wood and compromises the strength of the affected wood. Here we have a picture of the refrigerator used to store medications full of filth and condensate. The puma enclosure with the puma not acting normally. Mud in the camel areas and mud on his legs and hooves. Expired medications. Isolated tiger who had been treated for weight loss, but no diagnosis has been made. Empty rat bait boxes observed throughout the zoo again. Standing water in the moat of the rhino exhibit due to a deficient draining system, going on 3, 4, 5 years now. Termite tunnels on the wall of the ocelot exhibit. Empty boxes and discarded food and trash by the commissary. Roof leaking and moldy ceiling in the surgical room area for several years. Next inspection report, 1 month later, March 2017. Again, medications were ordered by the veterinarian 3 weeks ago, but not yet delivered. The delay in obtaining medications and services, lab, radiology, histopathology, etc., is due to the prolonged time and process needed to get the purchase order approved by the Purchase Finance Office. Thank you, Puerto Rico government. A more efficient method and quicker system is needed in order to get medications that are required to treat or prevent illness and disease, so as not to prolong the animal's discomfort, pain, and or suffering. The fans in the camel deer shelter building were not working when the zoo personnel tried to turn them on. During hot days, it is important to adequately ventilate the shelter by natural or mechanical means in order to minimize the risk of overheating the animals and to prevent discomfort and health issues which may affect the animals. The shift door between the primary enclosures and the patio of the olive baboon enclosure has flaking and pitted rust. These rust flakes fell on the ground when the door was closed. The advanced rusty surface can no longer be adequately cleaned or sanitized. All right, thank you to everybody who has sat through all these inspection reports. There's actually more reports that I didn't even include because they are so repetitive, because the zoo did not take corrective action and fix the problems, and they were cited year after year, month after month. with absolute impunity and no consequences until their shelter license was finally revoked in 2018 after Hurricane Maria hit the island in September of 2017 and really pushed this poor hellhole of a zoo over the edge. So when people say that it was all due to Hurricane Maria, that's a lie. Look at this. All these inspection reports that I reviewed were between 2007 and 2017, prior to Hurricane Maria or Hurricane Irma. So there's no excuse for this. This was ongoing, blatant abuse and neglect and failure repeatedly to address these inspection reports and all the deficiencies which were causing harm and suffering to these animals. And you want to tell me this prosecutor that's coming after me actually gives a shit about animal welfare? He does not. He was in charge of prosecuting the people responsible for the death and suffering and neglect of these animals at the zoo, and not a single person was held accountable, including the person that slit the throats of the deer with no anesthesia, fed them to the lions, fed beautiful, friendly guinea pigs alive to snakes. People need to be aware, these are not only violations on inspection reports, these are crimes. This is criminal conduct. And for me to be charged with 120 crimes pertaining to an animal rescue that I operate with many other volunteers, fosters, and supporters is completely bizarre and obscene. No other animal rescue on the island of Puerto Rico has had their door kicked down at 5:30 in the morning and their animals taken. Look at the zoo. I just sat and watched it. And then when the federal government demanded that the animals go to legitimate, properly staffed sanctuaries in the U.S., the Puerto Rican government put up a fight for years. From 2017 until 2023, that's 6 years after Hurricane Maria totally decimated the place and made it worse than any of these inspection reports even hint at. The Puerto Rican government still continued to force these animals to suffer with subpar care, lack of medications, lack of any sort of diagnostic equipment, mold, feces, no drainage, power out, not enough money for food. Vets aren't even getting paid, so they stopped showing up. And what kind of accountability was there? There was none, because the Puerto Rico government, in negotiating with the U.S. Department of Justice, which wanted to prosecute many of these people that caused the needless suffering and deaths of hundreds of these innocent zoo animals, the only way the Puerto Rico government would allow these animals to leave the island alive was if the Department of Justice agreed to completely drop their investigations and not hold anyone accountable for these atrocities. That does not preclude Prosecutor Andres Fernandez Vera, who was appointed to investigate the zoo for animal cruelty, along with Animal Cruelty Officer Jose Flores, the same animal cruelty officer that was assigned to my case and had his mind made up before he even set foot on my property, who testified against me in court. He did nothing in his position and his responsibility to be the animal cruelty officer in Mayaguez, did absolutely not one thing to save these zoo animals or improve their conditions or force the zoo to take proper care of these animals. The police and the prosecutor could have ended this suffering years ago, but that's not what they do in Puerto Rico. If you live there, if you're an animal rescuer especially, you know that tons of people all over the island of Puerto Rico, they're illegally breeding, illegally selling, hoarding, keeping animals in disgusting, filthy conditions, keeping them in cages for their entire life. And yet they treat me as though I am some random woman hoarding cats, where I am a legitimate, registered, nonprofit animal rescue with a full staff of volunteers, a full board of directors, enough resources to provide $10,000 a month of care between veterinary expenses, food, and most importantly, flying them to loving homes in the U.S. My cats at my rescue were not living.
Ma'am, the search warrant doesn't give you permission to read through my medical.
Any person knows that an animal rescue, when they take in new animals, especially if they're from the streets, not vaccinated, not treated for parasites, and sick, and not sterilized, those animals need to be in separate cages for their own protection until they are fully vetted and healthy and can fly to their adopters in the U.S. Instead of supporting my nonprofit animal rescue as required by Law 154, they destroyed my animal rescue and killed over 20% of the cats in the process. That's a whole nother story. You can watch my other videos on my situation. My point here is this prosecutor that has charged me with 57 felony counts, that has demanded that I do not get bail and that I sit in jail until my whole trial is over, which could be months or years. The same prosecutor who is trying to get a gag order against me to stop me from making these videos and getting my side of the story out while he is allowed to speak to the news, while his cops went on the news and talked about me, while his veterinarian went on the news and talked about me. He does not want to have me having the same opportunity where I'm telling the truth and providing facts. All his people are up there lying. They lied on the stand in court, which is kind of hilarious if it wasn't so disgusting. They literally lied. 2 cops and a veterinarian on the stand lied in manners that I have them on videotape totally contradicting. So that's why he doesn't want me releasing these videos, because I have the truth and they have nothing but lies, gossip, and false allegations. So I need you to contact this prosecutor. Tell him you've seen the videos. Demand to know why he is destroying the life of an innocent cat rescuer. I don't get paid a dime from this animal rescue that I am the president of. I do this as 100% volunteer, and actually I donate $15,000 to $30,000 a year of my own money to cover expenses which are not covered by donations. We don't get any government funding. The government of Puerto Rico, that is completely derelict in its duties to care for animals and to provide animal services in every municipality, well, they don't actually do that in only but a handful of municipalities on the island. So while they're totally violating their own laws and paying exterminators to round up all the animals from the streets and kill them, people like me, rescuers, who are not in it for the money, who get nothing personally out of devoting their life to rescuing animals, the government comes after us, especially those of us who are not from Puerto Rico. American rescuers are being attacked and prosecuted all over Puerto Rico. There's a long and documented history of the Puerto Rican police and government discriminating against and attacking people who are not from the island, while letting their own people get away literally with murder. So please email the prosecutor, call him, and share this. Share this all over the place, because the hypocrisy is mind-blowing. I've done nothing wrong, and here they come out as though they're suddenly gonna be tough on animal abuse and neglect. Well, you let the zoo publicly commit atrocities for decades. And it's the same team of people. That's what I don't understand. The same prosecutor, the same animal welfare cop, and the same veterinarian from the zoo, all at my house, shutting down my wonderful cat rescue. Well, none of them have a single consequence for this zoo, and none of them had any desire to hold anyone accountable for the deaths through negligence, years of negligence, gross negligence, and actually felony animal abuse at the zoo, and not one single person was ever held accountable for that. And yet, they're coming after me worse than they do any drug dealers, child rapists, serial killers. Look up the stats on that. Who gets prosecuted? There's no other animal rescue person on the island who's actually affiliated with a legitimate registered nonprofit animal rescue that's ever been prosecuted. Not in Mayaguez, not by this prosecutor, not by any prosecutor. So I'm getting all the special treatment. The judge even let the media into my hearing on June 7th, the probable cause hearing, and the media points out that that's not normal. Usually at these hearings, the press is not allowed in. So why are they allowed in my case? Why is this all over the news? Why is the prosecutor acting like he's going to become famous off this case, persecuting an innocent cat rescue lady that doesn't even take a dime for all the hard work that she does? What's behind this? Xenophobia, racism, dislike of outsiders, dislike of people like me who call out the government of Puerto Rico for their illegal conduct and their failure to manage their own island and their own problems. I didn't create the animal problem in Puerto Rico, but I spent the last 3 years working my butt off 7 days a week for free at my own expense, using my own vehicle, donating the use of my property to the rescue, having volunteers coming in and out of my property constantly to help with the animals, flying animals to the U.S. 3 times a week to adopters and no-kill rescues. But I'm going to be prosecuted. Well, the zoo extorts the Department of Justice to say every one of these animals at the zoo is going to sit here until it dies of neglect and abuse unless you agree to walk away, stop your investigations, stop your inquiries, and do not prosecute a single Puerto Rican for these atrocities at the zoo. That's what's happening here. The veterinarian from the zoo was Dr. Marilyn Arce. She's been a vet since 2008. She is primarily a lab animal veterinarian and a primate research veterinarian. She is not an animal rescue veterinarian. She does not work at or volunteer at any animal rescues on a full-time basis, as far as I can tell. Her primary activities have always been regarding lab animal research and primate animal research in labs, aside from the zoo work, where she apparently had no qualms about these abhorrent conditions at the zoo when she was the vet there for 2 years. And she wasn't held accountable. And yet she's sent to my house and my rescue to tell me that my conditions are not appropriate. I didn't have 15 years of failed inspections. The cops kicked down my door with zero investigation. Sergeant Ramos admitted on the stand that he took a complaint from a neighbor down the street, Maria Gonzalez, who has been harassing me continually for over 2 years, who sued me and lost 2 years ago trying to shut down my rescue, who had me investigated by the health department. Health department investigated and closed their case. The judge told her to leave me alone. She wouldn't. Then she goes to the news with her ridiculous false allegations. And then she went to the police August 25th and filed the report. August 25th. Less than a week later, with zero investigation, 15 cops kicked down my door in the dead of night with an illegal search warrant with no probable cause. No knock and announce. Nothing required by law. took my cats, killed 20 within the first week. And now they're charging me with 120 criminal offenses, including 57 felonies. Based on what? Some nosy, busybody neighbor who has nothing better to do than to set out to destroy my whole life because she didn't want me in the neighborhood? Oh, and she also hates cats. That was brought up many times. So, yeah, so that's what this is about. Thank you for watching. Please share this. This needs to get on the media. This needs to be on the news. Otherwise, people like me, people like you will be persecuted, have our rights violated, thrown in Puerto Rico prison, and life goes on for everybody else. That's how they run the show in Puerto Rico. Nobody has rights. Constitution is ignored. And if you're an outsider, they don't care. Especially. But if it's their own people doing the same thing, look the other way. That's how it is.